Hey guys, my name is Rai. Today I wanted to go and do a little bit of review over the most recent key I did, my Press Evoker, which is a plus 18 Ara-kara. Now this is the first 18 key I have time this season on any of my characters. It was pretty fun. It was actually a lot more challenging than I anticipated it to be, considering Ara-kara is kind of viewed as one of the easier dungeons. There is a pretty tough healing check here on the first boss, on some of the trash, and the second boss. Now, compared to the video I put out a little while ago, that's just a plus 15 Ara-kara. I wanted to take the time and kind of go over some of the strategies I used in this key to make sure that I helped my team achieve success. This includes things I might have done differently from my last video. This includes some playstyle adaptations, and I'll talk a little bit about more of the M plus kind of things that we do in this run to make sure that we can time this key. As I already have a video out talking about preservation of Evoker in this key, I'm going to comment a little bit on the combos that I do, but more so I want to talk through the dungeon, how you can approach this key as you're trying to push for title, or just in general trying to learn some of the more difficult mechanics or more less known mechanics that you or your friends might know going into this dungeon. As you can see right now, before we start the dungeon on this key level, we're going to use the tailoring buff available from these assistants located throughout the dungeon to make sure that we can get a stun on the mini boss in the first pull. For those of you that haven't used this before starting this dungeon, you can clear some of the trash and have a tailor in your group go up to one of these spiders on the ground, click on the buff, and as the key goes in, have the buff able to be used into the key that's going to provide a stun on a single target enemy that can be as well used with a pressing roar to be able to stun them for a prolonged period of time. So as we go into this pack, you're going to see right off the bat here, our augmentation evoker is going to get this stun and he's going to use the mini boss. We are fortunate enough to have two tailors. That means we did clear trash at the start of this dungeon to get two tailoring buffs that we can use to stun two mobs. Now, you're probably asking, why is this important? I think the biggest thing you're going to note here is on this first pull, on this key level, as you get to 15, 16, 17, you might see people die to web bolts. That's no different than as you get onto the ski level. As going into this first pull, you cannot afford to lose your bloodlust, lose your cooldowns, and lose everything as you're pulling 3 casters into the first pack. So as we get into this first pull, you're going to see really quickly that we use these stuns, and we use all of these things to make sure that we have enough time as possible to burn down one of the ads, get kicks out, and be able to start this pull off on a good foot. On an 18, the ski level, it does start to get a little bit tighter, albeit it is not the tightest ski, and you guys have probably seen that there have been some 19s, and I think like 1 or 2 20s timed. This is not a group that, normally plays together. We did manage to just luck it and get the ski. I'm going to fast forward a little bit ahead here to when we start. As our tank relogs, we're going to put in the key here in a second. Got it already checked down. The key is going to start. When starting this pull on Preservation Evoker, tank, or DPS, you need to make sure you think about a couple things. Never dismount early and never attack the ravenous crawlers that are kind of spawned here through at the start of the dungeon. Your goal is, as a DPS or a healer player in this pull, to make sure that you get down to the mini boss as quick as possible. On Preservation Evoker, I obviously have my pre-tip to scales active, so I can make sure I get a big heal off in the first couple globals. If you're a Poison Dispel class, you should make sure that immediately you're dispelling the first couple globals that go into the group. I'm assigned here on the second fear kick on Ixen. As like I kind of talked about at the start of the ski, we're making sure we use a pressing roar and that tailoring stun to make sure that the mini boss and one of the casters is stunned completely for the duration of Bloodlust and Ascendance. As you can see now, anytime a bolt goes through, it's bringing our party members down to about 25% health. That's before damage reduction effects such as Obsidian Scales, Bark Skin, or Astral Shift. So I'm making sure I have a full healing ramp here on every single one of the bolts, and I can use everything on this pull to make sure that our team lives. Again, there's my kick on the fear, and we're ready to go. One important note here is we do have a ton of poison dispels in this composition. However, what you can't hear in Discord right now is I'm calling every single poison dispel. I'm saying I'm getting this one, Og's getting this one, Boomkin's getting this one, etc. I want to avoid my tank dispelling as much as possible, as those of you that run with Prop Paladins can run in this area if they're spam dispelling. Going to this next pull is no different. If anybody gets blasted by one of these bolts on the ski level, they're going to die. So making sure they have a little bit of healing on them is a really good idea. Again, I'm communicating the bolts with my party members here and waiting to call Poison Cleansing Totem from my Shaman. I'm really fortunate in this composition because we have a lot of abilities to be able to cleanse healing. So, as you can see, I rewind there, just get everybody topped, and I'm not really afraid to use any of my healing buttons to be able to get through this pack. I'm dispelling my tank and giving him some healing when necessary. I'm calling for defensives, and I'm dispelling where I can. Again, I would say that if one of your team members in the ski level doesn't have a dispel, to make sure that you tell them that they should pop something. Whether you're a healer, a tank, or shot caller in your group, or just a bystander, making sure that you can communicate that you're dry, you need help, or for instance, if you can't get anything off on the poison, call for an external. On the 17 I did on my preservation evoker, we did have a lot less poison spells. I think we had two or three altogether, including my tank. So this time was a little bit easier. You can see that the poisons don't really have to tick on people for long, and if they do, we have 2 backup cauterizes that can help our team. Going to this mini boss, I know the same thing as my last video that I posted a little while ago, is that you need to have a lot of defensives ready for the very first shriek. Kind of talked about the start of this video, we talk a little bit about the tailoring buff. So as you can see right now, a couple frames ago, my Og went off the map and he went back to go get one of the tailoring buffs from the enemies on the ground. My shaman did go down here, but that's okay. We're going to get him healed up before we go into this mini boss. At this point, there's not a lot of healing going on, and we're just getting ramped up to make sure that we can survive the 1 tick. Again, the trick is, on the ski level, and if you are a tailor or you're interested in this tech, is that you can get the tailoring buff from one of the spiders on the ground, the interactable ones, and you can use a pressing roar to actually double the duration of that stun on this mob. So you can see that the spider here is getting stunned, he's getting blasted because we have Ascendance and PI and a ton of damage going into this. I start getting a ramp off here. I call that I'm going to be using my Zephyr, I'm going to be using my rescue, and I think I end up using health pot here because I've honestly learned to commit that a lot of other buttons aren't good enough to be able to get you through that instant AoE if you don't have a big DR. One move I could have done differently there is TD myself earlier, which I've kind of forgot to do because I was panicking. I wasn't really sure the exact timing of the roar, but we did get through it without anybody dying completely fine. This mini boss is dead and we're off to the next part of the pack. Again, when you're at the ski level, you need to make sure that no kicks really go through and that you're dispelling poisons as much as you can. No matter what role you're playing, you should be calming and communicating if you need help, if you need to use a defensive, or if you can use stops where needed. Another interesting thing on this pull is that you might not think about when you might be in a lure key is that there's actually a lot going on here. You have 2 kicks, one from the spider mini boss and one from Sky in the back. That thing needs to be grouped in. You do have poison going out, and one thing that your tank has to be cognizant of is those engorged crawlers leave a pretty nasty pool on the ground. If you walk away from the spider mini boss, this boss can fervent and melee and end up killing your enhancement shaman, your DK, or whatever player you decide to bring in here. So my tank is trying to calm and be cognizant of the fact that he might need a capacitor totem, a vortex, a typhoon, or some other kind of push on these engorged crawlers to give him and buy him some time before he can run away from the pack. Kind of the priority here is making sure we kill this mini boss before our tank gets stuck, it has to run away, and Voke, our shaman in this case, gets meleeed. I'm dispelling my tank. He is still taking a ton of damage, and some people might not think that they ever need to dispel the tank, but you know, it's good practice if you have a global. My damage doesn't matter that much in this key. I know that we're going to time the key if nobody dies, so I'm playing a little bit more defensively here than I probably would most keys. This is my first chance to actually do an 18 Ara-kara on Danglin, so when we pushed up this key, I was pretty excited. Now this boss is just about team communication as much as it is healing. Your tank's gonna get blasted, your team's gonna get blasted, and you should be trying to do damage as a healer when you can. Towards the end of this fight, you're gonna notice we try to skip an ad set entirely by using a pressing roar and landslides, and throughout here, you're gonna be seeing we do a couple things. We rotate our party-wide defensives, such as Zephyr. We rotate individual defensives, such as Obsidian Scales, Barkskin, and Astral Shift. And you can see my healing ramp specifically for this case as I open up with my traditional go into stasis, tip the Spirit Bloom, Temporal Anomaly, and Dream Breath. This is the highest HPS possible combination, Mythic Bless, and it's exceptionally good for this encounter, and I'm going to show you why. As we kind of get it past the first shrill, and you can see we take a ton of damage from it, the Essence Gossamer is no joke either on the ski level. You're going to be wanting to put out echoes, make sure that you get a lifeline going, and release your stasis. And as you can see, even with the stasis that I released pretty early, and I probably could have waited a little bit, you know, it still does a ton of damage. My goal here, going into this next one, is to get the exact same ramp going, except this time use a charge of Obsidian Scales to make sure that I have some sort of DR running. I ended up not using my scales at all, we just ended up using our other Zephyr, but we had some sort of DR going in. Remember, you never ever want to be dry, and you should be communicating with your team when you are, no matter what class you're playing, to get a defensive going during the shrill. This is a lot of damage, and it's not completely up to you as the healer to be able to heal through everyone just playing. So you can see here, I'm making sure my team has as much healing as possible. My team is eating some of the adds, and I'll talk about our strategy here in a second. But kind of the goal is, this boss can go a lot faster if you can have your melee DPS cleave off the adds and the boss at the same time. So you can see that we're always trying to be positioned near the adds as much as possible. I am trying to get enough healing here that I can get through this this healing ramp, and I do end up committing a Lifebind Spirit Bloom and a Rewind because I noticed that we were dipping pretty hard. I did commit a Charge of Scales, and you could see that again, as we're talking about the strategy, every time these adds spawn, my tank is tanking them right near the eggs so that my Enhanced Shaman in this case, and this could be for any melee DPS player, is able to fully hit them and the boss at the same time. I do commit a Spirit Bloom early here, and I make a pretty big mistake because this ends up costing me almost the death of my Boomkin. Now, because we had to move and I messed up that ramp because I was panicking, there are a lot of things I could have done there. I could have commit commune, I could have done a couple different things. But as I go to this next one, you'll see here that I release my stasis and my team is completely topped with my Lifebind ramp. I'm back over here, I'm fire breathing the adds and making sure my tank receives enough healing. You should not neglect your tank on this fight at any time because the overlap of the shrill and the bite can be really tough. So making sure that your healing ramp also goes in your tank is pretty helpful. We're kind of split at this point here, and I start casting a Spirit Bloom before I have to move. This shrill I think goes pretty well with this Gossamer, and it gives me a little bit of time to get kind of back and set up so that we can get on to the next one. You can see here that I do TD my tank, and I start sending out echoes to my party. And on this one, I'm a little bit worried because my tank doesn't get my Lifebind healing from my commune, meaning that he's going to getting meleeed and ticked pretty hard through this overlap. My Emerald Community is used at this point in the fight because I didn't have stasis and I wanted to save tip to scales for the next one. As you can see here, I'm trying really hard to cut this ad a little bit because they're mailing me very hard and get enough healing in my party for this next Essence Gossamer. I do commit Lifebind early, I do a Dream Breath, and I end up healing myself here as much as possible. This is a great time if you are playing Preservation and you're looking for some Preservation guide tips on this video, is using things like Life Spark to kind of fill your gaps. Sometimes you might not have the essence to be able to echo everybody in your party, so using things like Life Spark can be really useful. I do commit Zephyr here, I use Tip to Scale, Spirit Bloom, and my party is completely topped through this ramp. Again, this does hit really hard, and I noticed my Boomkin didn't have Bark there. We couldn't afford to sack him because my Paladin didn't have Bubble, and I couldn't use TD on him because it was on cooldown, so my Boomkin was kind of in danger territory. At this part of the fight, on this key level, what we're doing here is we're CCing the adds. We know that the boss at any time has less than 150 mil, we can probably kill it before the next ad set with our damage, so I'm making sure that we can do whatever we can to make sure that we can get through this part. Again, so we used a Pressing Roar and then Landslide on the adds. A Pressing Roar does extend the duration of Landslide on these adds, so you should be able to use it and be able to CC the adds for the entire duration. This last Shrill is very dangerous to me as I'm kind of running low in mana, we have no defensives, we decide not to use anything, my Evoker, Augmentation Evoker doesn't even use scales, and we almost go down. But luckily no cheat was used, no battle res was used, and I was able to make it through probably the hardest part of this dungeon in my eyes. When you're done with this part of the dungeon, I wouldn't say that you could rest yet. Depending if you're tanking, healing, or DPSing, you have a lot of very different responsibilities in this part of the dungeon. Kicks on this level can one-shot. As a tank, the extraction strikes can absolutely kill you very quickly, and you're going to see my tank drop here really low. It doesn't use Ardent Defender yet. But we do end up committing less to this book because I think we have everything. And the second thing you're going to note is the Bloodguard Slam. So every time that your party gets Bloodguard Slam, you should be using some sort of party defensive or a personal. As you can see here, I start casting Spirit Bloom right away as the slam goes out to make sure my party stopped. If at any point a leap goes out or a bolt, somebody will be automatically dead on this key level. I do manage to get the kickoff there before I die, which is great. But as you can see in the next pack, I do make a mistake and we do end up having a death here. I do commit a Lifebind here, just to help me get topped up before the frontal, and I start casting a Spirit Bloom, I think. Nice. Another good important note that you can kind of try to pay attention to as you're doing this part of the dungeon is anytime that you're playing with Evoker and you're dealing with these shrills, the guys on the left that cast the alarm, if you're playing your Evoker, you can sleepwalk these on a really short cooldown, so if you ever need like a permanent re-CC, just casting Sleepwalk for 1.5 seconds could be the difference between you having enough CC and you not, depending on your composition. Our composition specifically here is really strong for CC, as we have Vortex and Typhoon, we have 2 sets of Evoker stops, we have Thunderstorm, Cap Totem, Blinding Light, Hodge, etc. My tank does decide that we're going to pull all this together here, and we do have to get Circle in as fast as possible. As you can see, anytime you deal with these leapers, you have the chance of getting leapt on and getting slammed at the same time. Despite me even pressing Zephyr there, that leap right before this and this key level killed me. Meaning that I know that anytime a slam comes out now, anytime I deal with a Bloodworker and a slam, I'm going to need to make sure I pop something like Obsidian Scales. I did kind of, not play as well there, as I could have just hit Scales on top of the fact that I knew I wasn't going to be full health, but I do start setting up a healing ramp here just for when the Bloodguard is out of his stun from the tailoring buff, and we're going back to this pack. I'm setting up as much healing as possible on my tank, and I'm making sure to Emerald Commune. The reason why I do this here particularly, and as I've talked about in other videos, is that, especially on Trash, if you don't need your healing buttons for a little while, it's completely acceptable to use them on Trash to prevent any sort of overlaps. I know that in this Trash particularly, if we get the slam, a cast, and a Bloodguard leap on any one of our party members that isn't in a large DR like Astral Shift, Bark Skin, or Obsidian Scales, that person could die. Again, on the ski level, you need to make sure that you're doing enough to make sure that you're ready for always the unexpected. It's completely possible that we do miss kicks, even though we're in communication here, and it is possible as well that anybody could get left on, a tank could make a mistake, or a DPS player could miss a stop. So have enough healing prepped. Rolling Dream Breath, rolling reversions, and Grace Periods in your party is all really helpful. Another thing you're going to note too is that we're in these packs, we never actually kick the volley. Somebody asked me this on stream the other day, and I thought it was kind of interesting, so something to talk about on this key level is the volley actually doesn't scale with the key level like the bolts do. So the volley will go through and virtually does no damage as compared to the web bolts. It's very easily be healed up, and if a volley goes off, as long as you have a little bit of passive healing, like in this case, like I have Dream Breath, nobody's actually going to die, which is kind of cool. So if you have to priority kick between a web mage's bolt and a volley, I would always go for the web bolt. This next pull we do is actually pretty scary, and I think on the ski level we probably shouldn't have done it. However, our timing was kind of immaculate to get this all together. We did have damage, as you can see on the left side next to Boke Sham. He has Ascendance coming up. PP Boom does have 34 stacks of Spy Masters, you can see on the right of my screen, and an Incarnation. The most important imperative here is there is a bunch of casters. There's 3 casters in this pack. So Zari, our tank, does mark a skull, and we are rotating CCs throughout this pack to make sure that we can heal through and get through this part. I am setting up a stasis. I'm overhealing the start just to make sure that I have the snap instant heal at the end of this pack that we can get through. But as you can see, of our damage, with PP Boom using his Incarn, his Spy Masters, and Boke staying Ascend, this pack is dying very quickly. We're coordinating our stops and anything we can do to make sure that these bolts don't go through. Again, if these volleys go through, we're more than fine because I have a full stasis used to heal them up. As you can see, I released my stasis here. I'm watching PP Boom, and I'm watching my team to make sure that I can heal them up as soon as a bolt goes through. My tank isn't out of the woods either, so I'm making sure I'm giving him a ton of healing to get through this pack. The biggest thing about this place, this dungeon specific, and doing some of these pulls is all coordination. A lot of M+ is coordination, communicating with your team about what stops you have, but most importantly, making sure that you shot call and you don't miss what you're supposed to do. If you say you're going to get a stop, you should probably do it, and if you're going to take initiative, you should also communicate you're probably going to do it, just so you make sure that multiple people aren't overlapping the same stops. We know that at any point on this key level, if one of these heroic leaps or these shrills go through from these sentries, we're going to get a Bloodguard and we're going to lose a whole minute of time, if not more, trying to kill it. It means the key could be over. Another cool trick that we like to do on this key level from 16 to 18, you might have even seen your 15s, is that with an Augmentation Evoker, you can use Spatial Paradox on your healer and go and pull the boss from here. When pulling the boss from up here, your healer is going to be the first person that gets the debuff, meaning that they should pop a defensive, get Blessing of Sacrifice, or something else. This is all going to teleport your entire team into the boss room and let you skip over that other Bloodguard on the side. As you can see, I went in late there, and means I was a little bit behind on healing, so I had to make sure that the first person that got the debuff, if it wasn't my tank, gets a lot of healing. I did commit time dilation on my Boomkin with Ironbark because I was late to heal him, but from now, I should be rack in regular cadence to be able to get through this encounter. I found this encounter particularly challenging on Preservation, as there is a ton of single target healing with a very high HPS requirement, so if you ever fall behind, it's exceptionally hard to catch up. At this point in the dungeon, I know that we already committed Lust on Trash, so we don't have Lust on this boss, and it's going to be a long time. On my 17, I think this boss encounter was about 4 minutes, so I'm expecting about a 4:15, maybe even 4:20 encounter on this key level. As you can see, anytime that a debuff is going out, we're communicating what we're going to be using. I know here, for instance, that PP Boom is going to get a debuff here in a minute since the rotation's almost done and he has no bark. So I'm setting up a ramp on him, and I sit here, I use a full Life Spark proc with a Koi, Spirit Bloom him, and he sits in Bear. And for the next one, I know now he has bark. I'm watching my team, I know the captain my Evoker has scales, and that I'm using Time Dilation on him as well because I missed the first couple globals. And I use the same healing pattern that I would in Dawnbreaker and any of my other dungeons for single target healing. I know that now it's either going to Zari or Voke. I set an Echo up on Voke. I make sure I Echo him again, Life Spark him, Spirit Bloom him, and I'm trying to avoid these tornadoes as much as possible, and they're giving me a headache. I know that now it's on me, and here I use Renewing Blaze, and I panic, and I use Emerald Communion. At this part of the fight, I didn't expect or anticipate how much healing was going to have to be done single target on the ski level, so I am panicking a little bit. Although, like, everything's been fine, and I know that we're about to be back in normal rotation, I have Stasis back. I do know that I've already committed a big healing cooldown of mine, which is Communion to keep myself alive. That was Communion paired with Renewing Blaze, which is like a lot to commit on one little debuff, so I'm trying to think a little bit more strategically now about how I'm going to approach the rest of the fight. I think, commit my Life Bind here, my Stasis, a big Spirit Bloom on Voke with this Astral Shift, and I use my Hover. Remember, a really important tip too is if you are looking at this video from a preservation perspective, using Hover on any sort of damage event that happens on you, such as these dots, will give you a 20% DR that reduces over time. Meaning that, you know, as soon as you press Hover, as part of your Chronowarden toolkit, you will get a damage reduction effect. Again, we're back in rotation here. I know it's on me. I have Sack on me because I knew it was on me. I called for it, and I very easily topped myself up. Now that I'm this far into the fight, I know pretty well like what I need to use on every single person. So I'm really quickly making sure that I get, you know, my pre-echoes out, my hots, my grace periods from my reversions, and healing my tank. I don't think from any sort of perspective from a DPS, tank, or healer, this fight changes too much on a key level like this. There's no real interesting tricks that you do. You just kind of have to kill the ads and kill the boss. Be good at communicating your defensives. And if you are in Discord, making sure you communicate what your team might need to do to live. And especially telling them if you don't think you can cover them. There is a point in this fight where I don't think I can cover Captain, and I do let him cheat at the very end. So for here, for instance, he's fine. I do get Time Dilation on him. And I'm running for my life from these tornadoes. As you can see, I'm kind of struggling. But yeah, this fight is absolutely awful, and I'm really excited to never have to do this again. Again, we're back in a rotation here. It's on my tank, and the next one up should be coming here soon. So the boss is at 18% now, and I'm starting to think what I need for the next trash back. What can I commit here to make sure that my team lives? What do I need to save for the next pack? And what do I need to do to make sure that, you know, on the Flyers and the Overseer next up, if I need like Rewind, Stasis. Captain does, I think, cheat here. I make a half-second hesitation on what button I'm going to use. I was trying to think if I should commit Rewind. I don't. He does commit his 6-minute Evoker cheat. But, you know, I don't have a CD here, so I end up using Rewind on myself with Spirit Bloom just to keep myself topped. To talk about that decision I made a little bit is because I really wanted a charge of Obsidian Scales, if not 2 for the next pack. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. I knew I could probably live. I gambled with the Rewind, and I barely got through that overlap the encounter. So again here, the boss is dead, and we're going to talk a little bit about the next part of the dungeon. So typically there's 2 kinds of routes you follow at the end of this dungeon, which is one, you either skip this first Overseer with a tailoring buff, or you pull it. We do decide to pick up the last available tailoring buff in the dungeon up here. Captain does get it, and we stun this Overseer pretty quickly. The reason why I wanted to save my Obsidian Scales, particularly here, and have a couple charges, is because these Flyers are going to get pulled in by my tank soon. We have drones, which are going to beat up my tank pretty hard. We have an Overseer, which is a kick and a movement for all my DPS. And Flyers, which every time that they leap to our party, is going to hit them for about 20% of their health. Meaning that, you know, if they get doubled or tripled, they could get hit really hard and end up dying in 1 or 2 globals. So these Wing Flyers come coming in. Immediately, you can hear on my sound cues in my actual VOD that we're using Iron Bark, we're using Obsidian Scales, Renewing Blaze, and I'm doing a full healing ramp here just for my party. I'm watching and babysitting PP Boom here very carefully because I could see on the right hand side of my screen he has 27 stacks of Spy Masters. If he goes down here, it's going to be a lot of damage lost, which could result in us losing some time in the key. I'm rescuing PP where I can, I'm birded into my AUG, releasing my stasis, and trying to keep everybody topped at all times. Remember, I don't have Rewind here, I have Emerald Communion, and I have some short and powered spells, but using every hot and keeping my tank and my team alive as long as possible is my imperative. You can see how much damage these flyers do in this key level just from one jump. So knowing this, like I tell my tank here to hold on a sec. I don't have a lot of healing, so I'm trying my best to kind of get caught up while at the same time not being overwhelmed. The next set of flyers does come in here, and our tank does call that he's going to pull us all in, and I make a very, very stern call to say we should absolutely not do that, and you're going to see here why in a second. Despite all my healing ramp out here, our team is just getting absolutely trucked. PP Boom cannot afford to lose his Spy Masters. Voke just gets full on one shot. I TD him, and here I'm actually just going to end up using Emerald Communion to make sure that my team is topped this next set of jumps. We are going to be chaining in the rest of the pack here. We do have Ascendance coming up in 20 seconds. We do have Incarn. We do have 39 stacks of Spy Masters, and this is where we're going to be doing the most damage we probably can. Again, there's still flyers live and we haven't full sent yet, so I'm using Obsidian Scales and Renewing Blaze there. I'm using a hover DR to get myself moving, so I have a 20% additional wall. And we're using as much as possible as our team, like cohesively, to make sure that we stay alive. Again, here from my perspective and a healer perspective, I'm just healing, right? Like nobody can possibly sit below like 80% health for more than a couple seconds. And more importantly, my tank should have everything on him so that he can live. If you're used to tanking this key, you're going to know that these drones absolutely will destroy you if you tank them for too long. And especially too, you need to be using things like Freedom, Rescues, and Bubble if you're playing a prop paladin to make sure that you can get off the slow from these mobs. I think a lot of DPS players don't really understand how deadly this pull is as a tank, and if you've seen your tank flop here, maybe you can, but overpulling in here could be a very swift death. At this point, we have 6 minutes left in the key. We have 3 deaths, minor kind of hiccups. We had an Ankh death at the start from somebody standing in poison. We had my overlap from a Bloodworker slam overlap that, I kind of interpreted was going to be fine, but it wasn't. And lastly, we had that little death on trash there from Voke just getting one shot by all the trash. So as we go into this boss, I called I'm going to get a quick sip of mana and that I'm going to be going in here. We do have Heroism up. Again, we're going to be holding Bloodlust here for our Ascendants to come up and PP Boom to get some Spy Masters. And I'm communicating with my team here, and you're going to see throughout this entire fight that we're pinging anytime that we need to go to one of the puddles. In this composition, this was actually the freest I've ever had to play this fight. I have a poisonous spell on virtually everybody, which means that my healing requirement as compared to when I did this on 17 or 16, like a long time ago, is pretty low. The biggest part of the damage of this fight is actually going to be these blobs. As you can see, people are kind of getting trucked a little bit, like 30-40% of their health just by seeing the blob. But because everybody's dispelling themselves, my shaman is getting sack, or I'm dispelling him if needed, as long as we also have PCT. The healing requirement here is pretty low. So what do we do in this fight? Well, that's pretty much it. We're looking for black pools to be able to stand in, but most importantly, we're communicating, right? Like I'm looking around the room constantly trying to Azure Strike. Do I need to be somewhere particular? You can see on the left there, Captain pinged his. I say I'm gonna go behind. I'm doing a little bit of healing here and making sure my team's top through each one of these mechanics, and that's it. One preservation tip, one mage tip, one boomkin tip is for each one of these suck-ins, these cosmic singularities, you actually don't need to get in a black puddle at all. You can actually use hover from Chronowarden to be able to blink out of them every single time and never stand in one. So if you are short black puddles, you can definitely use your hover to get out of it, although it takes some practice. I think I have another video up where I do it, but that's something I can maybe talk about in a short clip or something. But if you're ever in a pinch, know that there are ways on Evoker, Boomkin, Mage, even Vengeance Demon Hunter that you can get out of it on. But yeah, I mean, this is pretty much the fight at this point. We're kind of watching the timer tick down. We did commit Lust and Ascend, and I'm just kind of healing through this encounter. I think we do have one unfortunate death here that's kind of sad. I think PP Boom does go down, but he kind of gets cornered. And I don't think he has Wild Charge up to be able to deal with the Cosmic Singularity, so he does get sucked in and die. But as you can see here, I'm still making sure I keep some healing in my tank, Dream Breaths on my team, Spirit Blooms kind of whenever, and trying to get rid of these Black Bloods. Overall, I think when approaching a dungeon at this level, you kind of need to take your base level knowledge and, you know, kind of put it into high gear, right? For those of you that have done, you know, a 13, 12, 14, 15 Ara-kara, and you think like, yeah, that's my easy key. Like everybody loves Ara-kara. It's like my quick weekly, trying to get better. You can see that a lot of these mechanics as you get into higher keys kind of stack up pretty quickly. You know, I haven't been playing my Preservation Evoker much recently, and you know, with all the vacations I've kind of been on and Christmas, this is the first, you know, little session I had in like, you know, a little over a week, and then last week I got one or two keys in, but even on this key level, right, like you could see like very quickly that no matter what role you're playing or what class you're playing, like your mistakes can really get amplified really quickly and it could result in death. So like for this fight, I'd be playing this a lot differently if I had a class that couldn't dispel itself, right? Like, you know, knowing now if I didn't have a prop alley, if I didn't have a boomkin and an og, right, like what would I do here? And you know, you always kind of have to adjust your expectation in doing the ski level. The reason why I made this video in particular is I've had a lot of requests of just general Mythic Plus coaching lately, and I did, and for some of you that do watch my videos, and hats off to you, you know, had a couple sessions before Christmas, whether it be tanking, healing, or DPSing, and for one of you just wanting to get, you know, a Mythic Plus UI kind of set up, you know, when you're approaching these kinds of things, like, you know, take time to review your gameplay, right? Like, I think the biggest thing that I always tell people is, you know, record yourself. You record yourself in a +7 and a +8, like, you know, figure out what you need to change in your UI, what you're not tracking, like what you could have done differently, and kind of like put yourself out there. Another comment is to like get out of your comfort zone. I think stop, you know, making sure that you keep repeating the same +8 just because, you know, you could time it. You know, it's really good to like jump into the +9, +10, +12. Try your hand at it, and if you fail, figure out why, right? Was it on you? Was it on your team? Like, what could you have done better to maybe help your team succeed? And yeah. So the boss is kind of at 6% here. We have like 40 seconds left in the key. My heart's kind of bounding because I'm like, oh shit, I'm gonna get an 18 on the board. I'm pretty excited here. I don't think there's been a Preservation Evoker that has ever timed an 18 this season, so I think this marks the first. And the boss is about to go down, and there it is. For those of you that tuned in this video, thanks a lot for watching. Thanks for all your support over the past couple months. I know a bunch of you have come onto Twitch, joined my Discord and whatnot. If you are interested in talking Mythic Plus, you're interested about Preservation Evoker, Prop Paladin, VDH, or any class you do play, I'm going to drop a link to my Discord below where I do post a lot of my memes, a lot of my weak auras, and anything else kind of provided in this video. But again, thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.